Welcome to Pivot Points, a new series featuring some of the world's most successful women, candidly sharing their stories and insights about how they made it to the top and how you can too. Hosted by Perry Yeatman, a straight-talking global executive and award-winning author who created the career and life of her dreams and now wants to help other ambitious women do the same.
Welcome. This is Perry Yeatman, host of Pivot Points. My next guest is someone I recently reconnected with. We've been in the same field for most of our careers and have known each other a bit for more than a decade, but I'd never really gotten to hear her story before this interview. Turns out, the more I get to know her, the more I respect, admire, and like her. A wonderful benefit, I have to say, of doing this work. The words that immediately come to mind when thinking of her are smart, grounded, caring, committed, and principled. She's the kind of person I wish both lived on my block and worked in my firm. Her name is Jane Randel. For years, she was the CCO and the head of CSR for Kate Spade, which of course is formerly Liz Claiborne. Today, she is the co-founder of Karp, Randel, which is a social impact consultancy, and the co-founder of the NGO No More, which addresses domestic violence and sexual assault. An important issue, obviously, and one where she is currently working with both the NFL and NASCAR. Jane, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Just so excited to have you. We know where you are today, but everybody had to start somewhere. And so I wish you could tell us a little bit about what was that first job that really kind of launched you, and how did you get it?
I would be happy to. It's kind of I'll have to abridge the story for you, or else we'd be here for 3 hours. I have to go back to college just because for anyone who's listening who's younger, or has younger, college-age kids, I did exactly what the career counselor at college said not to do. She said either look for a job senior year or don't look for a job senior year, but don't go halfway. So I, of course, went halfway. Kind of looked for a job, kind of didn't look for a job. Ended up doing something that was called Eastern College Career Day at the time. This round robin of interviews over spring break, I think, or maybe winter break. And, really is as much meant for them to find talent as it was for you to have practice doing interviews. So I graduated. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I thought I really wanted to be in advertising. And I wanted to be an assistant account executive. I wasn't going to let anyone put me into media. I knew what I decided that's what I want to do. And I put together a whole book, and I would go in and I would critique existing ads to show how, engaged I was and how eager I was. But they all wanted to just put me into media. Meanwhile, somebody I had met at Hill & Knowlton, big PR firm, the recruiter had stayed in touch with me. And over the course of the time, from the time I graduated until I got my job, I think I lived at home maybe 6 months. I went in and out of Hill & Knowlton a few times, not really knowing what public relations was. Mm-hmm. Truthfully, I was an East Asian Studies major. It was irrelevant.
Sure.
And it wasn't until I did, in fact, I think I went in a few times, and it wasn't until I did a writing test that I realized what PR was, and that a lot of the activities I'd done at school and in high school and in college and all of that were really, PR or publicity. Mm-hmm. And they hired me at Hill & Knowlton. I got there 2 weeks later. The woman that I was working for left the company, which is really like par for the course in PR world. But I was there, 2+ years, and as an assistant account executive, so not in advertising, but in PR, and with a nice group of other AAEs and AEs, and it was this incredibly fun social experience that they were also doing some development work for their young staff, and it was a great way to start. Mm-hmm. And it's something that when I talked to, I was in the fashion industry, and I can't tell you how many people would come through and say, I want to be in fashion PR, and don't you think I should just go right in-house and all of those things? And I would always say to them, you can do what you want, but if it were up to me, I would tell you to go to an agency, preferably a big one if you can, and get your sea legs, mm-hmm. learn mm-hmm. for the first couple of years so that you understand, maybe you think you want fashion, but suddenly you're going to be doing corporate stuff, and that's really exciting to you. You just mm-hmm. don't know. Mm-hmm. And, for me, I was in the consumer products group, which was a good fit. And, I did all sorts of really different things. And so that when I moved to fashion, it was the right time and the right move.
What do you think it was about, like, why did that recruiter decide to stay in touch with you, do you think? Was there something special that you did, or was it just the fact that you kept writing, or what was it that got their attention?
That's a good question. I really liked her. In fact, at one point I think I babysat for her cat. I really liked her.
Your top tip, go babysit for the cats of all the women you like to work with. Okay,
it's the best way to get a job. No, I don't know. I guess we just connected, and I guess, I always credited it, frankly, that she was just good at her job, in the sense that when she saw someone who was interesting, like, she brought me in and out a few times, not, I think, because she didn't like me, but she was trying to find the right fit. Mm-hmm. And I honestly, I can't tell you, Perry. Sometimes in my career, and this may be antithetical to what we're talking about, but it feels like things, it feels like I fall into things, and only in retrospect do you realize how you made them happen. Mm-hmm. And so this was kind of one of those.
Well, I actually think that's a really important point, because the truth is, a lot of young women that I'm talking to and that I'm coaching right now are so worried that they don't have it all figured out and they don't know exactly how to do this. And I keep saying to them, it's two things. I said, one thing, I think planning is very important, but the plan is somewhat irrelevant, because your life is never going to actually go exactly how you plan it, no matter what you plan, right? So you need to have a direction, you need to have a thought, you need to whatever. But then the second thing is, be open to opportunity all the time, because every job I ever got, I mean, if you had told me at pick any age, right, that I was going to end up in Asia and then Russia and then London, or that I was going to, like, never. None of these were on the list of things I expected to do in my life.
Right. No, I'm with you.
Yeah. If all of us had said no as things just unfolded, and we saw something at that moment and went with our gut, then the truth is most of us wouldn't have gotten where we got. So I think there is a degree of that, and I think it's actually really important for women to know that there are a lot of things you should be doing, but you shouldn't be worried, and you shouldn't be thinking that you're going to plan it all out, map it all out, and you have all the answers, and all you have to do is execute the plan.
Right. And I have actually talked to a number of young women in different places who feel like, okay, I've been here 2 years, do I have to move now? And they don't say want to move, and they're so, look, I respect people who have their eye on the next prize. Like, that is, you have to be doing your boss's job before you get the promotion. We all, we get that. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there is this, and I'm like, this is not some insight that I'm suddenly having that no one else has had, but, like, I appreciated, cutting my teeth at Hill & Knowlton, putting together media lists and, making media calls and doing things that they probably don't do anymore. But, putting together press kits, like literally assembling press kits, which you would never mail anymore.
Clip-ins.
But whatever it was.
Because you have to do that. You use a little stick glue and put it on.
Exactly. And I think that, there's kind of these two opposing forces. So I think there's this eagerness amongst a certain generation to succeed in a different way than there was for us, right? But it's like, I should be at the next level. I should be at the next level. You feel like sometimes people come in and interview, and they're interviewing you for your job. Like, I'm coming in out of school, but I'd like your job. But on the other hand, they're also not afraid. There is also this kind of undercurrent of don't be afraid to fail, which comes out of the tech world, right? Because, how many companies or products that people launch before they actually hit it big? Often it's like a lot. And I think that as someone who is not of that generation, and who came from a failure is not really an option sort of background, it's something that I try to remember, and I try to instill in my kids to some degree. My kids are young, but to some degree. And then as a parent, of course, balancing it's okay to fail, but you have to try. That's a whole other podcast.
Exactly. I'm not trying to raise failures. I'm trying to raise successes, but on the way, I know. I have the same issue. It's like, I was so driven my whole life. Driven beyond driven. It's funny. People say, how can you have low blood pressure? Because you can give everybody else high blood pressure. And it's just because I've always had a lot of energy and whatever. I don't know. But it's funny because, so I was like, okay, I just want my daughter to be happy. Right? I'm not going to push her to be, wildly successful. She just has to be happy, right? And then she got to be about maybe 10. And she was pretty like, I'm cool, I'm good, life is good, everyone loves me. She was just such a happy person, but she was not nearly using all of her talents, right? And so then I'm like, did I go too far? Did I not push her enough? Is she not competitive enough? Have I screwed this up? So you're so right. It's the whole balance. So there's a couple questions that and I'll put them out there. You can tackle them in any way you want. So One,
Okay.
I do want to actually talk about this mid-career point, and it may make sense that the story goes together, because I want to talk about, I know you're married, you have children. How do you deal with the trade-offs and the compromises to pursue your career and be the mom the way you want to be a mom at the same time? But I also want to know, today you are working in domestic violence, and you're working with the NFL, and you've got all these cool things going on. And I know you were at Liz Claiborne, Kate Spade, whatever. How did all of that, kind of in the short version, how did that unpack? And if you can answer them both at the same time, if you were also getting married, having kids in that same period, how did you manage that?
Right. Well, it is all interrelated in the sense that, so when I left Hill & Knowlton after 2.5 years or so, and I went into Liz Claiborne, and I went in to do beauty PR, which in this case was fragrance. And I remember when I left, they told me at Hill & Knowlton, you're going to pigeonhole yourself in fashion beauty, they try and keep you there and don't want you to leave. And ultimately I left, and what I walked into was really a Fortune 500 company that happened to make fashion, right? So we were listed on the stock exchange, and so it really was not, it wasn't, it wasn't about always seeding fashion shows and other things, all of which are valuable, but that's where they were kind of implying it was, and it wasn't. And now I ended up, I just remember saying, I just don't want to, I was at Liz for a long time, and at one point I said, I just don't want to be here when I'm 40. And of course 40 came and went, and, and there I was. So I was there for 22 years, which is really unheard of. And one of the only, and really the only reason I stayed is because my job kept evolving and moving. And I think had it not moved out of product publicity, which is fabulous for some people, but into corporate communications, which I found much more interesting for me.
Me too. Yeah.
I don't think I would have stayed. And it's funny because the way that I was the first person from an agency that they hired in the PR group, and the way that the office was organized was whoever got the phone did the interview. And so, facilitated the interview. And so it really was a great way to get to know senior staff. I mean, the joke is that my dad was also in the textile industry for many years and worked with people at the company. He'd say, do you know this person? I was like, no, but I know that person's boss. I was working with the presidents of this very odd concept. So it gave you a lot of exposure, very, very quickly within the company. And I was able to parlay that through attrition and other things into really doing corporate communications. And because I grew up there, I mean, I really did. I think I started when I was 25. And that was not that uncommon. It was interesting to watch. I mean, I was certainly not the only person who, met my husband and got married and had all throughout the whole kind of time you were there.
Did he also work at Liz Claiborne, by the way?
No.
Okay.
He does film and virtual reality and design and web and all sorts of other stuff. I married an artist, basically.
Which comes with pros and cons, but we won't go there. Yep.
Exactly. Again, another podcast. So in terms of what's funny is that in terms of my career, so I met my husband and we got married and I had my first son, and that was kind of fine. I was at that point working for a man who passed away a few years ago, who was really abusive, to be honest with you. We would, if you had to make a doctor's appointment, you'd go and you'd look at his schedule to see when he had meetings so you knew when you could make an appointment, like he wouldn't harass you. But on the other hand, I learned a ton from him. So there was a real love-hate relationship, honestly, and he probably, me and one other person, I think he probably treated the best, to be very honest with you. And it was interesting when his team first, and he was in his 60s, and when his team first started having babies, women on the team, I think he really felt like it was this personal affront to him, right? Now you can't take as good care of. My husband was fine with it, right? But the man, this man felt like I was abandoning him or whomever. And so it was interesting. You say, how does it impact your career? So I had this child. We lived in New Jersey. We were both working in New York. We had him in daycare, and of course, we're the ones that drop off early and pick up late. And always. And thankfully, thank you, New Jersey Transit. Whenever you're extra late because of the trains, it's 5 minutes, $20 or some insane thing. And my kid kept getting sick, and we weren't nearly as wired then as we are now, where being home could be okay. And this man has had a really hard time with it. And so we ended up getting a nanny. And the reason that that's a long, so like, okay, who cares? But the reason that that actually has some bearing is that shortly after he turned 1, not that shortly, but I guess it was shortly after he turned 1, we got pregnant again, but with twins, identical twins. Oh. And so my kids are 21 months apart. It was just interesting because thank God I had the nanny in place, because at some point, and a really supportive company in lots of ways, but at some point I had two nannies. I mean, I had, kind of one full-time and then that would come in part-time to so that the one that was full-time could take the older child out, because you couldn't go out with a 2-year-old in 2 buckets, as my sister liked to call them, babies in those buckets. And so it was very interesting. And people, now I will admit to the fact that I don't recall their first year very well. I remember pieces, but not like, I think I remember Nicholas's, my older son's, more. I will tell you that the first day back from maternity leave was, I believe it was August 14th, 2003. That would be the day of the blackout.
Oh, jeez.
In New York City. Yeah. That was my first day back.
Is this a sign, God? Seriously?
I mean, really, it was crazy. And amazingly, my husband and I found each other. We didn't work that far, and we hitchhiked through the Lincoln Tunnel. People always ask, and they ask all working women, and of course there's that point, you don't ask a dad, right, how he does it, but they all ask, women how you do it, and the answer is, what is my choice? I have these children, I have this home, it is, for whatever reason, maybe it's hardwiring, maybe it's who I married, maybe it's just, hardwiring, and maybe it's just me, I don't know. I run the household, I dealt with the nannies, I managed the food shopping and all that other stuff just fell on me, and I'm not original, right?
Yep,
I can't tell you how many women in the office be like, I just need a wife, right?
Exactly. Betty Hudson, that's exactly what she said. She said when she finally had to let the nanny go, the kids were had been in college for years, and she said, you don't understand, this is not your nanny, this is my wife, right? She's like, I don't want to let this person go. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, so it's amazing. And so, I compartmentalized to some degree. And obviously I did work, from home or on calls when you do what we do and communicate, you're on 24/7. And that was even before we were as wired and connected as we are. But, and I'm not the first person to do phone calls from the first day of kindergarten, watching the kids play at the after, then them out of the first day of kindergarten and, and all those other things that we do to try and really balance and manage, what our lives. And it's funny because my current business partner was also at Liz Claiborne for many years. Actually 22 years, but a different 22 years. She left about 5 years before I did. And so we've been friends for, eons. A while. Yeah.
And a really long time. And we worked a lot on social impact stuff, which is why it's what we're doing now. But we did a lot on sweatshops was really where we cut our teeth. And I will never forget, so I learned, what do? You learn from the people around you. And at her house one night, we're watching 2020 or something, was doing some sweatshop, probably about us, frankly, expose. And they're talking about how they forced them to have abortions or something like that. And her 8-year-old daughter turns and goes, Mom, what's an abortion? And I was like, bye, see ya, I'm home, going home, not my problem. So, it's kind of part of the game, of how we manage, our lives.
Exactly. So let me ask you, because it's a juggle, and it's all about, what I also love about all the women I'm talking to is that everyone has a different story, everybody has a different approach, and the bottom line is it's what really works for you, right? I mean, it is, like I married a guy who happens to be a chef, right, among other things, and he can build anything, design anything, fix anything, whatever. But I'm the breadwinner, I'm the money person, I'm the scheduler, and everything else falls to him. Right? If I hadn't made that choice and he had not said, I'll stay home with the kids, then we would have had to do something totally different. It would have worked, but it just would have been a different path. So let me ask you, we often, on your way up, and I'm thinking, I have never worked in fashion, but I'm thinking particularly in fashion. I worked in some beauty and makeup businesses, but did you feel, women are always more harshly scrutinized than men on everything from looks to parenting choices to whatever. Did you feel that on the way up? Was there a certain look you had to have to succeed in fashion at that point, or is it still the case?
I think in other companies it was and probably is, for sure. And I had done some temping work in other fashion companies, and I would definitely say that. And there are, all sorts of stories of companies who, you're not allowed to have anything personalized on your desk, and they want it all clean and white and, whatever else. Liz Claiborne, the rise of the company, it was 4 partners. They came together, all of whom were in their 50s when they started the company. It was, the first women-owned or, women-owned and run, actually, company, on the New York Stock Exchange. Went public in 1981 and went, flying up. It was only founded in 76 and went public in 81 and, flying up. And so there was a certain culture at Liz. When I first got there, the phone book was organized by first name, which is fine, except if there's a couple of Christines, like you're just screwed. I mean, honestly, you're just screwed.
Absolutely.
It was like, can we not do that anymore, please? But there was because it was a woman, a woman who was one of the founders or the founder and whose name it was on the label. We also were not high fashion, right? We were kind of at one point, but it was kind of becoming more mass at that point, certainly less aspirational. And there were so many women who were division heads, presidents. There were tons of women there when I got there. I think if you'd asked Robbie, my business partner, she was the first general counsel. And she was a female general counsel from the 80s, sometime in the mid 80s.
Oh, that is early. Yep.
Yeah. And my boss, the woman that hired me into the department, had a baby about a year after I got there and decided she wanted to work 4 days a week. And she really pioneered, this was in the early 90s also, really pioneered the 4-day work week, the flexible work week. In that regard, now, I'll say, however, the board was still predominantly men, probably predominantly white men at the time. Upper management, senior management at the time, Liz and her husband had retired, and it was a lot of men. So it was a little bit like that. You get to a point, there is that point that, I guess you can use the word glass ceiling. There is a point, and it feels like, everyone's gone to that point, and not beyond. But there were, that waxed and waned a bit. So I didn't necessarily feel like, in my industry, it was not that big an issue for me.
Got it. Okay, good. So question. So you went from 22 years at Liz Claiborne, and then did Liz Claiborne become Kate Spade? Is that how that worked?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. When you went to transition, a lot of women today, as you already have kind of done one thing. They've been very successful at it, and then they've said, I want to do something else. And for whatever cumulative group of reasons they're doing that, they're making a different choice. And what I'm finding is that even extremely successful women, when they go to make a transition, are actually feeling really insecure, feeling like they got a little lost there for a little bit. Was there a point where, when you went to make a transition, you felt that way? And what advice would you give to someone else who is trying to make a major transition or create a second act at this point?
So, what happened was that after the last 7 years of my time at Liz was really all about transformation and transition and upheaval in a lot of ways. And we were, the management team was really pretty beaten down by the time we sold off everything else and remaining with Kate Spade, which is what it was supposed to happen, right? That was the stronger brand, et cetera. And so what went on then was that the back end of Liz Claiborne, so the business side basically, merged with the front end, the brand side of Kate Spade, and that's what became Kate Spade and Company. And at that point, the CEO I had been working for had retired, had left, not retired, he left. There was a planned, departure for a lot of senior management, and it was, I kind of say I wanted to wait until the end. I waited till the end, and then it was time to go.
Yep.
And that was all good. It was all planned. But when you've been somewhere for so long, and you suddenly don't have that identity anymore, that's weird. You and I know each other from the seminar where we met, and the first seminar that I went to. Well, first of all, the first seminar I went to where we changed the name of the company from Liz Claiborne to Fifth and Pacific, people were like, what? And then when I went and didn't even have an affiliation, it's a very strange, it's a very strange thing. And so what what I realized, and the opportunity that I was afforded actually, was that I didn't have to do what I was doing. Mm-hmm. So, I did a lot of interviews and a lot of talking to people, and people would say, and very kindly would say, so what is it you're going to do now? And I would always say, well, I guess it's just corporate communications because that's what I know and that's what I've done. But the truth is, it's not really what made me happy. Mm-hmm. It didn't make me unhappy, but it just wasn't, that's not what kind of lit the fire.
It wasn't the meaning in your life, yep.
No.
Yeah.
And I was also very fortunate because one of my responsibilities, the company was to do cause marketing, and it was a domestic violence program, and I ran it from 1995 till 2012.
That explains it.
And then that was how I got into this with a different colleague, and I started what is now known as No More, which is this overarching umbrella for domestic violence and sexual assault. So I had this piece in my life, mm-hmm. And this goes back to what you were saying, you go to Russia or live a month. But for me, it was, I didn't know that I would do public speaking all the time. I didn't know that through some of the work that I was doing at Liz Claiborne, we'd end up sitting in a room with President Clinton. I didn't know that I would be going to Asia looking at factories. There's just all these things that you don't know. Mm-hmm. And to your point before about planning, and if you had told me that, I would have been like, are you on drugs? I don't know what you're talking about. So what occurred to me as I was kind of sitting on my back patio, really being open to moving and thinking, I just built this patio and I really love it and I'd hate to leave it, and my kids are in middle school and high school, all the things that we think about, right? Mm-hmm. I had no fire in my belly for these jobs because I didn't really want them.
Yep.
And what then occurred to me, and it was kind of fortuitous on the back of somebody else, unfortunately, but I had a relationship. I had met with some folks at the NFL about 18 months before they had the issue with Ray Rice, mm-hmm. and so I knew some folks there. And when that all went down, there I am sitting on my back patio, and I get a phone call and ask if I would come in and work with and meet with the commissioner and other people, and then ultimately was asked to was hired as a consultant for them amongst other people around domestic violence and sexual assault. So it wasn't around communications at all. It was around programs and education and policy and other stuff. And that was really kind of this wake up for me where I said, wait a second, I like this. This is what I like, and this is what makes me happy. Mm-hmm. And not just about domestic violence, just about, whatever kind of social impact. And that was huge. And then the next kind of huge piece was realizing that I didn't really want to do it alone. I just much prefer, I've always liked writing with other people. I just always like working with other people.
Me too.
And and so my business partner now was working, my friend. We were like weddings, bar mitzvahs, babies. We were very close friends. And so we were having breakfast. She was working at a private family foundation. She had been out of the workplace for 5 years, went back, and was really frustrated at the pace of it after being, because she really made a pivot too out of law into philanthropy, and was so frustrated at the slow pace that I just looked at her one day and I said, this is stupid. Why don't we just do this together? And that was kind of like a light bulb went off for both of us. And then, we were like, this is what we want to do and this is what we can do. And now we're faced with trying to build a business, which is a whole other, I didn't even have to do hours. I worked in a corporation. I didn't do hours. Mm-hmm. And it's a total change in that regard. So I guess, you said it before, it's be open. It's allow yourself time to think. Allow yourself time to be, if you're fortunate enough to have it. And explore. I would tell you, if I could get paid for just going and meeting with different people as we network and look to build our business, going in and meeting with all these different people and all these different companies, if someone would just pay me to do that, I'd be really happy because it's really interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's no downside to it for somebody, people are happy to, I always feel like people met with me when I was young, and I'll always meet with somebody. I think you have to pay it forward. And people love to meet and they love to talk about themselves, evidenced by me not shutting up. So people love to talk about themselves, and if you can get someone talking about themselves and what they do, in a way that teaches you something or helps to, educate you about whatever it is, it's a win for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that one of the things you also said there, which I think is really important, is about knowing yourself when you make a transition. And I think there's two things I would say. One is you weren't just running away from something. You ultimately found what you were running toward, right? You decided that there was something you wanted. And that was the same for me. People often ask me, how did you step down and how did that work out? Now, I'm also going to tell you that I spent a lot of time, I had, just like you, a very clear identity, and it was like suddenly, oh my God, I'm not a global executive anymore. I'm not in the, what are you kidding me? Who am I? And suddenly I'm just Kirsten's mom, which is exactly what I wanted, because we also, at the same time I stepped down, we moved back to the East Coast. And so it was like people had no clue that I had done all these cool things, right? And it was just, you're Kirsten's mom. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm just Kirsten's mom. And that was what I had chosen. But one of the things I knew going in that I would struggle with was actually not the lack of, not the money and the power and the prestige and all that. It's the human beings. It's actually having a team that you see physically every day and get to engage with. And so I think that knowing what you really want, recognizing and not losing sight of the fact that you're giving up certain things because you want something else and that you've made a choice to do that. And the second thing is understanding what makes you happy in terms of how you like to work and where you like to work and all that stuff too. Those two things combined gives you a pretty good chance at making a transition that's going to work for you. Without those, I think it's quite challenging. And that's why, for me, for example, I'm now looking at where can I go actually work with people, right? Like I don't even need to be paid. I just want like an office, and like I'm actually talking to an agency, the biggest agency in town. I'm like, can I just come and like just use some of your space, and I'll train your people for you for free. I just want to hang with like-minded folk because I really am missing that. So I get it.
Yeah, no, and it's very funny because people who've watched Robbie and I work, I mean, she's a lawyer. She thinks really critically in a really different way than I do. And so there's lots that she knows more than I know and other stuff that I know more than she knows. And, we challenge each other all the time. And we were laughing. We were like, our first year of kind of this business partnership was kind of like being married, right? I haven't spent that much time with her. I mean, I'd spent a ton, but not in this way. And, you really get to know somebody and all their, and all their flaws and all their strengths, and hopefully you still like each other at the end, and we do, and we really complement each other, and it's very interesting to now have someone kind of call you on stuff too, that maybe somebody hadn't called you on before. So I think I do think transitions are so important. I think I will tell you that I had a CEO. I don't know if this is apropos of nothing, but I had a CEO. My kind of second guy I worked for, who got very upset because somebody was leaving the company really for more money and going back to work for someone that she hated and was terrified of because there was more money. And he was something that I actually thought made a lot of sense. He said, when you're looking at something like that, you have to, you're looking to evaluate that. You have to ask yourself about your current situation. Am I having fun? Am I adequately paid? And am I still learning? And if you could answer yes to two of those questions, you're good. You need to think about it really hard. Right. Because one of the things, for me, we all spend too much time doing what we're doing. And yes, you're going to have, long stretches maybe where you're miserable. But overall, you should really enjoy what you do. And I'll never forget, I was very excited as a young assistant account executive or account executive because I got the USA Today box, one of their whole boxes. Right? It was a big deal. And I was like running around, I was so excited. And someone said to me, this guy said to me, who's a peer, he said, if that makes you so happy, like you are in the right job.
Exactly.
Like, thank you.
Exactly.
It was really funny. Yeah. So I think that, I like what you said about knowing yourself and really cutting yourself a little slack, but following your heart. Yeah, if you can.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you work really hard, and at some point, hopefully, the reward of that is you have choice, and that you can then go really pursue what you want. So we've talked about, you've obviously been very successful. You still are very successful. One of the things, I haven't really met very many successful women who didn't at some point face a bad break, a disappointment, a failure, unacceptable behavior. since it didn't stop you from getting where you are, would you be willing to share with listeners, something that really didn't go right? I mean, you talked about a difficult boss. Were there other things that either didn't go right or where it was just really unacceptable? And how did you handle it? How did you get through it?
Well, I have to kind of focus on the difficult boss only because I worked for him for 12 years.
Oh,
so I worked with him for...
Okay, God bless you. That's
a really long
time.
Super long time. Okay, so in part, how do we get through it? There was a group of us that made up corporate marketing, and we were all very close and relied on each other for support. I don't. We were. You probably heard this too. Don't cry in the office, sort of thing. And he was that kind of guy, and I just would never let that. I could go into my office and get upset, but I wasn't going to ever let him see me get upset. Mm-hmm. And what I realized was when he was able to really get me, it was where I was. He was no different. It was maybe I was tired, maybe I was premenstrual, maybe I had broken up with somebody. Like it was something in me that was different as opposed to him. But I will tell you, this is so minor, but it was such a drag. You would write something for him, and he was very smart and a very good writer. And I would write something, he'd ask me to write, and you'd bring it in, and he'd go, "Who wrote this?" Now, here's the problem with that. You don't know if he's saying who wrote this because it's good mm-hmm. or who wrote this because it sucks. Mm-hmm. And it was, I know it sounds stupid, but, we do a lot of writing in our work, and mm-hmm. and it was this kind of constant, it really taught me a lot about motivating and editing, honestly, because he rewrote, and I've always tried to edit, because mm-hmm. once you know that it's going to be rewritten, you don't try that hard anymore.
Mm-hmm. You also don't learn from it. Editing gets you to think differently. Rewriting is just like, oh, thanks, here it is again.
Right. You rewrote it again, and you're a better writer. Okay, fine. Or you're not, right? Whatever. But so that was really one of them. And I'll tell you very honestly, the other thing that probably is more that I don't really know. I think I know what it's about, but, it's not like I didn't interview it for other jobs throughout the time I was at Liz Claiborne. And partially because of the domestic violence work and because of the access and other things, I don't think I really had that fire in my belly. I don't think I really looked like I wanted the gig, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you, I did, I talked to a lot of people, talked to a lot of recruiters, don't get passed on that often, pass forward. And when I did, it wasn't like I had people knocking down my door. Partially based on the experience I had, and that it was very corporate and not as much corporate and marketing mm-hmm. as others. But that's really also what led me to do what I'm doing now, and that was hard, right? Because that's quote unquote failure on some level, and I'm also the breadwinner, so that's an issue. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because part of the other reason that I'm doing what I'm doing now is so that I also have other things to point to if I decide I want to go back into a corporate environment. Mm-hmm. Because what was so great about being somewhere for so long was also a detriment to a lot of people.
Yep. Yep.
And, you pay the price for that. Even though, truthfully, my job was never the same. It was not this monotonous day in, day out, day in, day out. It just evolved all the time. I mean, in the last 7 years, we bought and sold companies, every month practically. I mean, mostly sold because we were really in the shitter. Oops, sorry. We were really not doing well. So I think that for me has been hard.
Yeah.
But, doing my own, but I'm not doing my own thing because of that. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm doing my own thing because that's what felt right.
Yeah, you went towards something. You didn't just get out of that. You actually had something else you had passion for, which makes complete sense. And now I do understand how you got into domestic violence, because that was one of the things I was trying to figure out is how you made that pivot, but it makes complete sense. So now we're going to be in what I call the fun round. So it's just a bunch of quick questions that may not feel like they're directly related to career advice, but I think they're kind of insightful for people and helpful and if nothing else, fun for me, right? What is the one word you would use to describe your career so far and why?
The words that come to mind are like amazing and surprising, and I mean it in kind of the both edges of the sword of those words. So amazing in that it's just been, if I take it in a whole, it's been really I've really enjoyed it. It's been interesting. I've met great people, all that. But then amazing, it's like what we were talking about before. What? I've been at the White House? What? I've been like, huh? Like I can email this person and they're going to email me back, and and so there's that surprise, that element of, again, growing up on Long Island, that wasn't really where I thought I would be. Mm-hmm. And so I guess it's a kind of both of those, so it's amazing in that it's been really fulfilling and I've enjoyed it, but amazing because I sometimes, and this goes to your insecure point, stand back and go, what? You sure me? Like you want to, like, I think you're talking to the person behind me, I'm pretty sure, but you seem to be talking to me. So those are the words.
Excellent. And who does or who has inspired you?
So I have been very fortunate to have very strong women in my life. I'm one of three sisters, one of three girls. My mother was, a very successful, she was a travel agent, but she had a very successful business. And so there's always been, kind of strong women. My father, we didn't have any boys, and my father really raised us to be, if he was tough, as he said, because he wanted us to be able to be, he wanted to raise independent women. I think, by the way, when they had to wait as long as they did, I was 34 when I had my first kid, and my older sister, who's 5 years older, had just had one before me. So they waited a long time to have grandchildren. They may have been kicking themselves a little bit because, but
that's right. Why did we teach them this career idea? Come on.
Exactly. That was dumb.
We should have picked at least one to stay home.
Exactly. But so I've been very fortunate, and I have kind of two women in my life, outside of family, who have played just huge roles in who I am and how I am. And one of them is my business partner, Robbie, and I'm not just saying that because I have to suck up. But I worked with her. She was a general counsel. I was a baby PR person. And we worked together and got close. And I just always, I've done, this is like bragging. I don't mean to be, but she was a Crane's 40 under 40, and then I was a Crane's 40 under 40. Like I followed her footsteps, and I've watched how she interacted and watched her play at that level, right? Mm-hmm. Up within the C-suite. And then the other is this amazing woman who's actually also in the business, a woman named Ann Glauber, who is with Finn Partners, but she's the person I started No More with, and she became we had only two PR agencies for our program at the time, and one of them had been there for 13 years, and they were great. But then I met Ann, and I knew that we needed to treat it a little bit differently. And Ann and I think were kind of related in their life, and we just became super, super close friends. And so she, and she, again, she's someone, not unlike you in the sense that she, she lived in the Middle East and spoke Arabic and has started, this No More is one of several organizations she started that have, national implications. And she's just so smart, but so down to earth, and her family's lovely. Like, it's just, and you watch, and I always say, on any occasion I can, I say, I want to grow up to be you. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean,
yes,
she's
she sounds awesome.
She's awesome. She's beloved and respected and funny and real and she's amazing. So it's but I know that I'm very lucky, right? That I've had these women in my life, and not to say that there aren't men that have inspired me, but these women in particular who have really helped me be who I am.
Mm-hmm. So if you could have, so we've got those ones aside. If you could have a superpower roundtable with a few women, living or passed away, who would they be and why?
Okay, so one is going to be weird, and it comes from my childhood. It's not really weird, but Amelia Earhart. I was really obsessed with Amelia Earhart when I was a kid. I used to read, I don't know if you remember these biographies they used to have in the library. They were kind of like a hardcover, and it would be Clara Barton or Florence Nightingale.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I loved Amelia Earhart. I loved what she did. I was intrigued by her disappearance.
Yep, the mystery.
And yeah, exactly. And I think, and I suppose, you're little, you don't really know, it was this notion of doing, kind of forging her own path and being brave enough and sure of herself to forge her own path, which, again, back to your point, I'm trying to teach my kids this now. You got to fake it till you make it. I mean, I'm trying to teach them, like, half the people in the world don't know what the hell they're doing. They just look like they do. And, and I think that, so she just, always seemed like I don't know. I always was really intrigued and really inspired by her and what she did. One of them is Marian Wright Edelman. She spoke at my of the Children's Defense Fund. She spoke at my college graduation, and I was so impressed by her, and have been kind of close to her on a bunch of occasions. Never met her. She's fierce, but I read after that after school I read a bunch of her books and always was reading. There's just something about her. I mean, talk about strong and committed and someone who's really impacted our world. I don't know. I just really, I think I'd like to be at a table she's at. I'm not sure I could handle the conversation, but I'd like to just be with her.
Yep, I like it.
And then the last person, and it's kind of funny, but it's Liz Claiborne. Again, she was a woman who, and I met her once. She died a number of years ago. I met her once. I talked to her a few times before that. And she had a very distinct voice. She was like, "Hello." She has a very low voice, and she wouldn't know me from Adam. But it was her story. Her story with her husband is sordid and sort of interesting. But this having this point of view and really revolutionizing so many things. I mean, we're really too young to remember, but I kind of remember. But, before Liz, department stores were organized by classification. So you went to the suit department or the slacks department or the blouse department. And it really wasn't until Liz where you bought, at a certain price point. And it wasn't until Liz where you went and you bought a whole ensemble together, so that everything was hanging together. It was a little Garanimals, we know that, but they were all hanging together, and that was that revolutionized the way department stores sold clothes. We also were one of the first companies to go, well, depending on your point of view, you may like it or not, but to source overseas, and really, find ways to go international in that regard. And I think I'd love to, and she and her husband were incredible philanthropists and very into environment and saving the elephants and all sorts of things. So, and they were able to follow their passion. But, again, I said they were in their 50s when they started this company. So these people became, incredibly wealthy, but not like Mark Zuckerberg, right? I mean, they were had really gone through, and I'm sure when they started, weren't expecting that that the company was going to become what it became.
Mm-hmm. I love those three, and if you ever get that round table together, I'd be happy to join you. So maybe we'll find out finally what happened to Amelia. But
exactly.
I want to come back to something you said, because you're the second person who said it, and what's interesting is I know it's true, and I know exactly what it means for me. But when I talk about it with other young women, they actually bristle sometimes, and they feel it's so disingenuous, and they feel like, it's not right. And what it is when you said you have to fake it till you make it. And as I said, that is exactly right, because nobody walks into a job and actually knows 100% what they should be doing, right? And has 100% confidence that they're going to succeed. But yet, the whole point is, this idea of never let them see you sweat or whatever.
Totally.
So why is it you think that women, and what would you tell them if a woman's hearing that and thinking, oh my God, no, that I don't want to overclaim, I don't want to overpromise, I don't know everything, I don't want to show off. I mean, all of the various kind of issues that women have about not being willing to say, yes, I can do this. What do you make of that? What would you tell them?
Well, I think it's an internal struggle that we have every day, right? Whether it's going into a meeting and pitching a business. I'll never forget, I was at a talk, and the speaker was talking about kind of this imposter syndrome, right? Which is very similar. I mean, so I have to be careful, because someone's going to figure out that I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. He asked very pointedly, it was a big room, and it was all people that do what we do, and he said, how many people have ever felt this? And you saw a lot of hands go up, and not just women, right? Men too. A lot of people acknowledge that. And I think, it's funny, because I was literally just having this conversation with my son this morning. I think for me, it's trying not to let the fear get the best of you. And I don't believe in overpromising, and that's really my big thing, right? And so Robbie and I, whenever we're pitching, I'm like, that's too much, we can't do that. We're always pushing each other, push, pull. You can do it, or you'll figure out how to do it, right? and by the time these young women, get to a certain point, you know who you are, you know how you work, you know that, did you always pull out the paper at school? You always pulled it out, you always were part of the group and you did your part, whatever it is, you know yourself. And I think I think it's really, what fake it, I guess this is what it boils down to. What fake it till you make it means rely on yourself.
Yep. Good.
Trust yourself.
Rephrasing. I like it. Okay,
Yep.
We're coming to the end here. I just have 2 questions left. One is, if you could do it all again, what advice would you give your younger self? Or what's the best piece of career advice you ever got?
I think the advice I would give my younger self, and it goes right back to the conversation we were having, is don't be afraid to fail. Or make mistakes. Obviously don't, push the code for the nuclear bomb. That would be bad. But, by and large, what you're doing is not going to cause, some major catastrophe. So I think being able to put things into perspective and kind of figure out what failure is, because I think certain women maybe of our generation, maybe they're not afraid to fail when they're younger, but women now. But, for us, failure just, again, especially because we were women, failure just was not an option.
That's exactly right.
And I think, but it is. You can, and you learn. It's okay to fail as long as you learn from it. If you continue to fail, that's a problem. You
have to succeed more often than you fail, but nonetheless,
a
single failure, unless it is truly outrageously catastrophic, is not actually going to impact you. It's probably going to make you better. But
I will tell you, actually, something just popped into my head. My dad gave me a piece of advice. He said, in business, don't be afraid to make a decision. He says, because people are always afraid to make decisions. They're afraid to take responsibility and make a decision. You have a 50-50 chance of being right.
I like it.
I thought it was just brilliant, right?
Exactly.
He's
pretty
right.
Good odds.
People don't want to go out on a limb because they're afraid of failing. But chances are you have a 50-50 chance. You're right or you're wrong.
And that's even if you don't know anything about it, right? So,
exactly.
when you add experience and knowledge and everything else, your odds get significantly better.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Excellent. Okay. So, last question. What would you think is the single most important thing you would tell other women who are seeking to build the career and life of their dreams? Other than don't fail, or don't be afraid to fail.
Right, no, I'm done with that one. What would I tell them? I'm struggling, honestly, because there's, kind of the path, follow your dreams and do, I guess it's kind of do what you like to do. Try new things so that you can figure out what it is you really have a passion for. And also enjoy your life. I don't think we can have, I don't know what all means. I don't know that we can have it all. When my kids were little, I had to choose either having dinner with them or giving them a bath. Like, I couldn't do all of it. I couldn't get home in time to do all of it. And then that changes when they get older, because it's more important to be with them at dinner than to give them a bath and so on.
I won't comment on that, yes. Hopefully. If we're lucky, at 13, it's more important to have dinner than give them a bath, yes.
Yes, exactly. And I think, I think it's pick the things that are important to you, and they change over time because we all evolve, and allow yourself to evolve with what's in front of you. And, you said it before, don't be afraid to take advantage of opportunities that present yourself. Because I have a friend, I don't know if you know her as well, who is in this business in a very high-powered job and just left to go join a startup. And she was in a very solid job. She never had to leave. She was, really well respected, and just went to join a startup. A real startup. And, she's like, I'm 45. She happens not to be married. And she's like, now's the time. And it was just, you got to respect that.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, and as you said, it's all about, you work hard so that you buy yourself choices. And now it's like, okay, I think the message that I would take away from that, which I so agree with, which is you can't live your life for anybody but you, right? At the end of the day, what everybody else has is opinions, and only you really know what you should do. And the other thing I take away from that, which I have always believed in, is that you're never going to be great at something if you don't love it. So don't pick something that you don't love. Like that, you were telling the story about the woman who, was going to work for somebody she hated for more money. If you only are following the money, my experience is 9 out of 10 times at some point, you're going to end up just completely imploding because the money alone is not going to be enough to make you want to get out of bed every day. And so it doesn't work. Well, Jane, this has been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. And I thank you for your time. If listeners wanted to know more about you and your work, is there a place that they should go? Is there a website or a Twitter handle or anything you'd like to share?
Sure. They can look at my company website, which is Karp, Karp, Randel, RANDEL.com. Very original. She's Karp, I'm Randel. And also, if they want to learn more about No More and get involved, which we would love because it's about combating domestic violence and sexual assault, that's just at nomore.org.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jane. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
You've been listening to Pivot Points, a series designed to help ambitious women have the careers and lives of their dreams. To hear more interviews, go to www.yourcareeryourterms.com and be sure to tell